What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Progressive Gentlemen podcast. As always, we're your hosts. I'm Dan.
I'm Matt.
And thank you for taking the time to nerd out about music with us. I'm changing it up. I'm keeping it this way.
Keeping them on the
toes. It's that time of year. It's probably our favorite episode to do. Granted, we've only done it one other time. But it was our favorite at the time, and I think we're going to keep it rolling. So, Album of the Year 2022. We both came up, how many albums did we listen to this year? Like somewhere around 50, like probably, I don't even have a number really.
I had 42.
Geez.
And that's just the ones that I remembered to put on my list after I listened to them.
And I know like I started with a huge list and then I like whittled it down to like 26 and then I added like 6 more. And then it was just, it was pretty wild. So much good music. It was tough to come up with a definitive 10 just for myself.
It was tough.
And then at the end of the day, we compared our lists, and they did not match up, as usual. There were some similarities, but, I'd never expect us to have like a 1-to-1 top 10 list. And rather than last year where we kind of went down the line and it was like, all right, this one was my number 7 and this one was your number 3. We actually decided to combine our lists. We used like a weighted system. We won't go into the details, but we came up with a definitive Progressive Gentlemen top 10, and that's what we're going to run down today.
Yeah, I figured it'd be easier to follow along than having like, oh, well, this album was my 10 and your 7, and so we figured one definitive Progressive Gentlemen top 10 was an easier thing for listeners to follow along with, and kind of gives us like, we got to have a talk prior to the show as well, which is fun, kind of duking it out on what goes where.
Yeah, we had a couple where we had to like make some decisions because like from a weighted perspective, they were kind of like lining up and we were like, oh, we need to like make a decision. But it was a lot of fun. It was cool to see how the list sort of like turned out when we combined them. And overall, I think we were pretty happy with it. I'm looking forward to talking about it. But there were a couple that, were on my list that didn't make the cut. And then, same with you. So we wanted to throw in at least one honorable mention each just to be able to talk about some records that, we were really high on and that didn't necessarily make our combined top 10, like our definitive top 10. Matt, did you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So for me, it was neck and neck for these ones. So I guess I'll just have to pick one here on the fly. I'll go with Worm Shepherd's Ritual Hymns. It's a kind of a weird one for, I guess my list was fairly heavy this year, but they're like, I don't know that I would really put them in the progressive. They're kind of more in the like deathcore with like elements of like black metal in there. But I don't know, something about the album, it hit very like Lorna Shore-y feel to it. And I don't know if there's something about the album that just really stuck with me. It came out in January and I kept listening to it throughout the year, so it had the staying power.
I was going to say that's typically a good sign that it's going to be, a record that sticks with you. Especially, whenever we're coming up with a definitive list. If it came out in January and you're still thinking about it in December.
Yeah, it was one. It's always like my get amped up. Like if I need, like a pick me up, energy boost or something, like get me going. I usually throw this album on. So my favorite song was Of Sword and Nail, and it's of spelled O-V in case you're trying to search it on Spotify or whatever. But there are several on there that were solid. The one's called like Raven's Keep or something. They all have really cool song names, and there's like a lot of like orchestral sounding stuff in there. It's but then it gets like violently heavy. And so it's a pretty cool, interesting album that I don't know if it was just the timing that it came out where there wasn't a ton of other albums dropping and that's why it like stood out, but it stuck with me all year. So
nice.
What about your honorable mention?
So mine's going to go in a completely different direction. So David Maximisic, I don't know if that's how his last name is pronounced, but I just like saying it Meeseek because Rick and
I'm
Morty, Mr.
Meeseek.
Meeseeks. I don't know why, but that's what we're sticking with. Released a record called Bilo 4, I believe. Yeah, or Bilo
Milo,
IV.
like the grocery store.
That's yeah. I don't know if that are there a lot of those.
I don't think so. I think
I was
that's
gonna
like
say,
a northeastern United States thing.
but I'm a huge fan of David as a guitarist. He's very much in like the same vein as like a Pliny. If you're a fan of Pliny, but this kind of made me a fan of him as like a composer. I just felt like the record had a really cool flow to it. It even gets a bit heavy at times, which I kind of didn't super expect based on some of the other things I've listened to from him. And there were also some really awesome vocal features from someone named Alexandra Jelmus. I don't even know if that's it's the DJ in the front, so I just automatically just think gentleman, whatever. But and I felt like those vocal features sort of took it to like another level for me. There's a song called "Wedding" on this record that is kind of a mix of everything that I've already just said, but it has those like really cool heavy elements and then really cool vocal feature. Yeah, honestly, it was pretty high. It was somewhere in the middle of my top 10, but it didn't make our final top 10. So that's why I was like, I have to at least bring this one up. If you're a fan of like the Pliny style instrumentals and then, want to hear something get a little genty, a little heavy with some, female vocals that are, I mean, I'm typically a fan of female vocals in metal as well. So that kind of like also struck a chord for me.
Yeah, that's cool. I honestly, the it may have made our top 10 had I actually listened to this album. Like, I didn't even know that it came out. So, and I like his music too. So, I feel like this had a strong chance of making my top 10. I just didn't know that it existed.
Yeah, and we kind of got down to the wire where it was like we can't add more albums to our lists here. We got to
Yeah.
just like we came up with the top 10. We got to roll with it. But yeah, David Maximisic, Bilo IV, Bilo 4, however you want to pronounce it. Super great album. Definitely check it out. But I think it's time to get into the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of our definitive top 10 here. Coming in at number 10, Astronoid's Radiant Bloom.
Whew, boy, that album. I wanted it. I was wanting it to land higher, but with our weighting system, it didn't. But still, the fact that it made the top 10 is. I feel like this is where this one belongs. It's so cool. I love how like the instrumentation is so heavy, and if you like isolated the vocals and just had like the instrumentation, it would be like this could be like a periphery album almost. But then like you throw in the lyrics that are like a lot like the higher register and like clean sung and stuff that I don't know. It seemed like the instrumentation didn't go along with the lyrics, but it still worked. Like it kind of had that sort of like what Sleep Token does. It's like they've got like a really good voice and like clean sing a lot with like heavy chuggy instrumentation, and I think this album did that well.
Yeah, and I mean we've talked about Astronoid before. I feel like they have a very unique sound. Most of that is due to the vocal and sort of the filter that's on that vocal. It kind of gives it a very unique, almost like artificial intelligence, robotic, alien, whatever the hell you want to call it, type like sort of. It's a very unique vocal style, and they really established their sound. I feel like on that debut self-title record, definitely continued onto this record. Shout out to Three Dot Records for recording it. That's Periphery's label. If you're not aware of that one, I know you are, Matt, but just for the
Yeah.
people listening, and you did mention Periphery as sort of like a comp for the instrumentation, so
It's
I think
funny.
that's worth mentioning.
Yeah, it's funny though because I forgot that Three Dot did this record, so it was complete like not purposeful comparison either.
Yeah, and I felt like this record was consistent. The reason for me that it didn't sort of ascend higher in my personal top 10 and kind of probably why it lands at number 10 on our combined list, I just felt like it lacked sort of a standout track to me personally. I felt like it was a very consistent record. It has replay value. The sound is good. It's definitely a solid continuation on their self-titled record. Just nothing super stood out to me as like I need this on a playlist that I'm going to listen to all the time kind of thing. You know, there were some good tracks, some that were better than others, but nothing was like this is the song for me.
Oh man, I was like, for me, it was like one after the other. It was like, man, it starts off with Admin, which is so good, and then I really liked Eyes, which I know is like, I think that was the first single that they dropped.
Yeah.
And I think that might be my favorite track on the album. And then like Drown towards the end is really good. I do think it's my favorite tracks are front loaded. So that's probably for me why I didn't put it higher on my list than I did. Because I like when albums are like well balanced because I usually listen to them in track order and don't do the shuffle play. I don't know. I guess
Which is
like,
no, that's the way to do it.
yeah. I'm kind of
Especially
like
in
the
prog.
music
I mean,
purist in that way.
especially with prog music because typically, you know, songs flow into each other, so it's almost like you're kind of doing a disservice to the track by not having like the lead in from the previous track.
Yeah, and so that's I think I've just kind of like because I listen to so many like concept albums that I've just like trained my brain to listen to albums that way. So
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, and again, I liked the song Eyes. You know, there were a couple other tracks that I probably put on my like best songs of the year 2022 playlist. But I don't know. There were just so many really, really good records this year and standout tracks that just have insane replay value for me personally. That's kind of why this sort of fell lower for me, and that's kind of why it lands at 10 on our list. But yeah. So number 10, Astronoid, Radiant Bloom, definitely worth checking out if you haven't. And if you have, I'm curious to hear where it landed on your list. You know, we're going to be posting this list on Instagram. Jump on there and definitely tell us what we screwed up. But moving on to number 9, this is a record that you kind of introduced me to. I wasn't super it wasn't super on my radar until you kind of put it on my radar. So number 9, Cult of Luna, The Long Road North.
yeah, this one I actually like until this year I hadn't listened to a ton of Cult of Luna previously, but there were a ton of people that I follow on Instagram that kept posting of like play this record, and in particular the one he was the previous guitarist for Norma Jean. I follow him on Instagram, and it was like almost daily that he was like, this is your daily reminder to listen to this album. And so I was like, I should probably check this out because, you know, I like Norma Jean, and also his taste in music is usually, he kind of seems to really enjoy that like sludgy, like doomy metal. And I was like, okay, I'm going to check this out. And, yeah, this album does a really good job of like telling a story through music. I don't know. It's just very very atmospheric, but also like doomy and sludgy at the same time.
I have a funny take for this record.
What's that?
So I actually really liked it. It might have even been, I'm not 100% sure because I don't remember off the top of my head, but this actually might have been higher on my list than yours. I don't remember.
I think it was actually. Yeah.
Or it might have been the only one that we had in the same spot. I don't remember. But regardless, I had this way higher than I expected to.
Yeah, I didn't think this was going to be on your list. And then when you wrote it down, I was like, wow, I am surprised that I talked you into it.
So first off, I just want to say the soundscape that's built in this record is amazing. I mean, it's fantastic. It's very captivating. It's very much one of those records that you need to listen to sort of like from beginning to end, but it is a commitment. It's over an hour long. I think it comes in like maybe like a little over 70 minutes, that's a long time to spend listening to one record. So it's in multiple songs too. If you're just trying to like cherry pick a track, there's a lot of songs that are like around or exceeding 10 minutes long. So just to understand what you're getting yourself into, but it's definitely worth it. Like I said, the soundscape is nuts. It's going to make it difficult to digest for like an average metal fan, but again, definitely worth the commitment. But here's my funny take. So not funny. Well, it might be a little funny. Are you familiar with the band Silver Snakes?
Yes.
Their Saboteur record. I feel like this record, The Long Road North, is like if that record by Silver Snakes was like heavy. I get so many similar, like almost borderline industrial vibes, except like a lot heavier, obviously, with Cult of Luna.
Yeah.
That for some reason, like songs like the Silver Arc, I don't know why, but I just immediately went to like songs like Devotion by Silver Snakes. I don't know why, but that's where my brain took me. But I also said it's like if the dwarves from Lord of the Rings made a metal record.
I like that.
And
Maybe that's why I like it so much, because I'm into all of that, the high fantasy stuff, and
absolutely.
I'm also a big fan of like the doom sludgy stuff too. So like, and like the ambient atmospheric metal too.
Super
so
ambient, super atmospheric, very. It takes you on a journey. It builds that cool soundscape, and it's got the industrial vibes. It's got the doom vibes. It's got the, like the death metal style sort of instrumentation at times. It gets heavy. It gets sludgy. It sounds like Silver Snake sometimes. It sounds like
I'm picturing
it's
parts
interesting.
of the songs that I can see like what you're talking about, the comparisons.
Yeah, honestly, go back and listen to Silver Arc with like the thought in mind of like Silver Snakes at some point, and just tell me what you think, because
it's even got
I don't
silver
know.
in the name too. So
right? Maybe that's what triggered it. I don't know, but I don't. Yeah, it was very interesting that popped into my head. But so number 9, Cult of Luna, The Long Road North. Super cool album, incredible soundscape that they build, and well worth the 70-minute commitment.
Yeah, I think it's honestly one that, like, just lay back and it's like, basically like set up an hour and 10 minutes or so of time that you can have uninterrupted. Just like put on a good pair of headphones, or blast on a speaker system that you have, like lay back on your couch or in your bed and just kind of enjoy it, because there are some parts where it kind of like drones, and it's like it kind of ebbs and flows at parts, and some people I guess may find that boring, like they just may want it to be like heavy the whole time. But to me, like you said about the building of the atmosphere, I think like the slower, like quieter, kind of less going on parts make the parts where it gets like heavy and crazy so much more impactful.
Yeah, the ebb and flow of this record, I think, is done very well, and it lends well to sort of the soundscape that they're trying to build. Just to give it a quick comparison before we move on to 8, there was another record that I felt like was really trying to build a soundscape, and I feel like maybe it fell flat, and that was Norma Jean's record this year. I feel like it was almost a lot of like filler more than like actually trying to build something, like the build up and such.
Yeah.
So just to throw that out there, like another band that sort of tried to maybe do something similar, but to me it kind of fell flat. These guys do the same thing, but it actually lends to what they're trying to accomplish on the record.
It's funny that like you make that comparison, because like the ex-guitarist from Norma Jean was the one that like got me to check this album out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of funny that make that comparison. But yeah, I can kind of see that from the Norma Jean album, which I know, like I think it was in like a few episodes ago that I talked about I wasn't a big fan of that album. I did go back and listen to it, and just for the put it on the record, since I talked about it on the podcast, that album did grow on me. There were a couple songs I think that like kind of turned me off from the album on the initial listen through, but then when I went back, I'm like, no, I dig this. But yeah, it didn't like quite strike as high as these other albums, but I did enjoy it. So just
for me, it started way higher and kind of worked its way out of my top 10. So so we kind of went in an opposite direction there. Yeah. But anyways, number 9, Cult of Luna, The Long Road North. Definitely check it out. Moving on to number 8, a band we discovered together. By seeing them at a show because they filled in for Idola, I believe.
Yeah.
And that is Seder. They released their second album, Totem, this year. We were a huge fan of these guys when we saw them live. We got to meet them. Really cool guys. And yeah, I think they sort of elevate themselves to the next level on this record. I think it's a great follow up to their debut record. Nice mix of heavy and clean. They have progressive elements that'll remind you of bands like Idola, like Dance Gavin Dance. Without the crazy weird lyrics. Progressive elements, but then they also have like straight line sort of like metalcore vibes as well. Maybe even like older metalcore sort of whenever, like the emo scene was sort of developing, the quote unquote screamo was sort of evolving into just metalcore. It'll give you vibes of that. And, overall great record. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, this album hit pretty high for me. I think after listening to them, like when they opened and they replaced Idola on that tour, listening to them quite a bit, and then it got me to like dive back into Fall of Troy just because there's like a lot of similarities sound wise to me. But then that like kind of got me in this like cycle that I'm like, okay, well now that got me hyped to go back to Seder. And then and then this album came out and I was like, oh, now there's new Seder too. And so I was pretty hyped about this album. And yeah, it's like their sound is very similar to their previous album. Like they didn't do a drastic change in their sound, but I think like musically they did a lot of interesting things. Like it doesn't sound like they just copy pasted their previous album or anything. Like they grew as musicians. And yeah, this album is like, if you've listened to Seder before, because I know we've talked about them several times, this album I think you'll like if you like their previous stuff. It's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, it's definitely like an evolution from their previous record. And you can definitely get a lot of modern metalcore band, modern prog metal band influences. Like you can pick it up. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Dance Gavin Dance is high on that list for them, because musically it's definitely in line with that.
Yeah,
That sound. Bands like that, bands like Hail the Sun, even, which again, that's another band that sort of falls in a similar vein.
Yeah, I love Hail the Sun too.
But for me, I think Totem was a standout track. That's the title track, and then Vector was another one, which I think was one of the singles. Yeah, just that mix of heavy and clean with the the different sort of style changes and such that they go through. That they progress through. They're very much in that prog vein. Yeah, instrumentally they're solid. There's just not a whole lot not to like about these guys.
Yeah, I mean, and they do like clean vocals and screams, and they do them both well.
Right.
Which I know some like, depending on your style of music, some people like just clean, some people like just the screams, some people like the mix, but sometimes the mixes aren't great. Like you've got one that's kind of weird and doesn't fit as well, but I think they do them both very well. And then from like guitar and drums and just instrumentation standpoint, they're very, very talented.
And just something to point out too, and I've pointed this out before about other bands. Both of their vocalists, because they have a clean and a like unclean, heavy, whatever the hell you want to call it, vocalist,
harsh
vocalist. They both play guitar. Wild, you know what I mean? Like that's just impressive to me that you can do vocals that well while also playing your instrument that well, because they both play at a high level. So
yeah, they're both like shredding while they're playing. It's not like there's not really any like slow parts in Seder songs. Like they're
like here and there, but it's never like it's never super long lived. They're not writing any ballads.
yeah,
and it's interesting.
going.
And it's just interesting that, I mean, these guys aren't playing in four most of the time either. These guys are playing in crazy time signatures. I just can't imagine trying to do that
Yeah.
myself. So it's like it's always something that I'm impressed by. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. But yeah, Seder Totem, number 8 on our list. Definitely go check this out if you've not already. I think maybe they are one of maybe the lesser known bands, probably them and Astronoid, in our top 10. So if you've not checked them out by now and you're a fan of bands like Dance Gavin Dance, Hail the Sun, Idola, everything in that sort of like quote unquote swan core, like Will Swan, like sort of, types of bands or whatever, definitely go check them out. I think you will be pleasantly surprised.
I would argue that they are better than Dance Gavin Dance.
Oh man, hot take. We're gonna get all the Dance Gavin Dance fans. Oh man,
I mean, I like Dance
especially
Gavin
in a
Dance,
year
but
where Dance Gavin Dance released a record and they are not in our top 10.
honestly, that's one that I didn't even like. I listened to it, but I forgot because I must have been like out and about when I was listening to it, so I didn't put it on my list to rank it. I just actually now that you say that, I noticed I don't have it on there.
I actually didn't hate it. I can't get over some of the crazy lyrical stuff that they do, and I know that's their shtick, and I know there's a lot of people that are, that's why they're into it. It's just fun and whatever, and that's cool. And instrumentally, they're great. They just don't. I don't know. They don't.
Well, that's why I think like
they don't hit
for me,
any
I
buttons
think
for me.
Seder hit better because like the lyrics are like more meaningful and less nonsensical, and like they have a similar level of musicianship and like a similar sound too. So it's like you can kind of compare the two, and to me, Seder was just a better like the Totem was a better album.
Yeah,
Then
for
was
sure.
a Jackpot Juicer, I think is what they
Yep,
called.
that was it.
I mean, it's a funny name for an album, but
Yeah. All right, so that was number 8, Seder Totem. Moving on to number 7, the band Unprocessed dropped a record called Gold, and I absolutely loved this record. I had this way higher than 7 on my list, but it is what it is. This is where it fell. I personally think that this had some of the year's most memorable tracks. For me personally, songs like Rain, really drew me in from like, I felt like the lyrics were very, heartfelt, emotional, and then just the instrumentation is just elite. These guys are nuts, on the same level as like a Polyphia or like an Animals as Leaders as far as just like instrumental music goes. And then when you factor in the fact that, again, the lead guitarist, the guy doing all this crazy shit on guitar, is also the vocalist, it just makes it all that much more impressive to me.
yeah, it is impressive.
And they get pretty heavy on a couple tracks on this record as well, which, whenever you think of bands, that you're comparing to Polyphia doesn't super get heavy anymore. They're just kind of like in that, how can we make prog metal equal like hip hop or whatever the hell they're trying to do. Which again, I appreciate. Honestly, that Polyphia record, not to change gears, but that Polyphia record had some of Polyphia's best tracks that they've ever written, in my opinion. Like Playing God, great song. The song with Chino from Deftones, great
Bloodbath?
song.
Yeah, that's my favorite track on that entire album.
So I mean, that's not to say that what Polyphia is doing is bad, because I think they're very innovative, and they're doing a lot of things that other bands in their sort of same vein aren't doing. It's just a lot of the stuff, the more experimental tracks like that ABC with Sophia, whatever the heck her name is.
Sophia Black.
Yeah, like that, like songs like that just didn't click for me. I know there are people that'll disagree with me on that, but yeah, for me, that's kind of why Polyphia is not on this list and Unprocessed is, because I feel like they're doing what Polyphia is doing, but like more aligned with my personal interests.
Yeah.
And like what clicks for me in music, which is just killer instrumentation, meaningful lyricism, and just well composed tracks, which again, Polyphia does that. But,
Yeah.
some of the more experimental stuff that they do doesn't click with me as much, where unprocessed on this record, everything clicked for me.
Yeah, for me the particular track that stands out is The Longing. It has a lot of that like Animals as Leaders, like percussive, like uh like thumping stuff.
Yep, which Polyphia has been adapting a lot lately as well too. I've noticed that. Like
Yeah. It
that's been
seems like
Tim's like new thing.
yeah. But this track, like, it has a lot of that, which is really cool, and it kind of starts out with that. But then it's got like the clean vocals, but then there's just like one part where it just like lets loose, and then you hear like the like the harsh vocals that come in, and you're kind of not expecting it because I'd say the rest of the album, like the vocals are mostly clean vocals. And it's like generally softer and like poppier vocals. And then like this one comes in and you're like, what was that? And it's like that song was like really like the standout one to me that like, okay, this is definitely something I need to need to dig into deeper.
Yeah, that was definitely another track on there that was a standout track for the year for me. That and Rain are definitely like high up there on my list. Just as far as, standout songs for the year goes. But there's a lot on. I mean, Orange Grove is another one that was a good song. I mean, there's a lot of good songs on this record. So, if you like bands like Polyphia, and if you've not heard of Unprocessed, first of all, and you like bands like Polyphia, maybe aren't as into the more experimental stuff that Polyphia does, I think you'd find sort of a home with Unprocessed. I think they would sort of fill that gap for you. And Gold is a fantastic record, which is why it comes in at number 7 for us.
Yeah, I think just like real quick before we move on to the next
Yeah.
one, for anyone who like is a fan of intervals, the vocal and who may have not listened to Unprocessed, I feel like the vocals kind of sound like Mike Semensky from A Voice Within at times, like not 100%, but like a close-ish comparison. So like if you liked that album, it's like the vocals are, a lot of the time sound like in that kind of register and that kind
Yeah,
of
and
vibe.
I can see like some of the instrumentals sort of fitting in with Aaron Marshall's style. Not exactly, but like that's a fair comparison. So that's a
Yeah,
solid
like
solid shout out there.
close-ish, not exact,
Yeah.
but like that was the thing that popped into my head in some of the songs was like this kind of fits like A Voice Within era intervals, and I know some people don't like that, but personally it's one of my favorite intervals albums, so
Nice.
take that with a grain of salt, I guess.
So yeah, number 7, Unprocessed. The record is Gold. Great record. Moving on to number 6. This record is Conjurer's Pathos. I know
think it's
there's like
Pathos.
All right, I was
Yeah.
gonna say I know there's like a chica over one of the letters, and I don't remember which one. That doesn't let me do that with my English American keyboard, but
Yeah, and I don't
so that's
have
why I
the,
questioned the pronunciation.
yeah, and I don't have a numpad on my keyboard to be able to do the alt key sequence to put it on there either. So
But yeah, Conjurer Pathos. This one for you, I think, is one that you're going to want to talk about a lot more than me. This did not make my top 15, I don't even think, but I think this was this was your number 1 record.
yeah, this was my favorite album of the year. It I don't know, just I guess in similar vein, like I know earlier in the year I talked about Fit for an Autopsy's record, like probably the first, I don't know, 10 episodes of the podcast in the year, how much I enjoyed that album. And this album was actually produced by Fit for an Autopsy's guitarist. And it has a lot of that Fit for an Autopsy sound, I think. They definitely are different. It kind of crests into black metal a little, but I'd say it's kind of it's in the like hardcore metalcore with like a dash of maybe like a dash of deathcore, a dash of black metal in there. So they're doing a lot of different things. It's definitely not a happy, fun album. It's heavy and like the subject matter is like much more intense and dark. Even the album artwork is kind of like eerie, creepy. Like it looks like a photo that would be hanging in a hallway in a haunted house that someone was for sure murdered in. Um, but I don't know, it's super heavy. I really like the harsh vocals in it, and there's just like some cool like it gets like real slow, heavy, chuggy breakdowns in it and stuff. For me, the my favorite song is Basilisk. Um, it's that was kind of like the standout track, but even like It Dwells, which is the first track on the album, is fantastic too. And then it leads into Rot, I believe, is the second song. Um, and there's just so many good tracks on it that it was just like one after the other that kept me intrigued. And surprisingly, even my wife, who doesn't typically like this heavy of music, but she was kind of like nodding her head to the music. And like when I read her the lyrics, she was kind of like joked of like, oh, happy. But and I was like, well, the song is called Rot. I don't know what you expect. But it was like I don't know, I think the subject matter and stuff kind of like, wow, that's interesting. And she seemed like way more interested than I would have expected her to be based on the album. It's not something I would have recommended for her to listen to, but she was even enjoying it. So I think even if you're not into heavy stuff, maybe it's for you too.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it just I don't know why I didn't vibe with it as much. Usually, if it's something, especially if it's going to be something that's like your number one record, it's going to at least scratch my top 10. And yeah, I don't know. I have no real reason why. Typically, the deathcore, death metal stuff doesn't really resonate as much with me anymore. So that, I guess, is my excuse. But then you look at my list, and I have several records that would fit that category that were in my top 10. So it's like, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I'm glad you liked it. I'm going to listen to it again because I feel like I need to revisit it. I guess, for me, you didn't listen to that David Maximisic record, so that's your homework after this, and then
Yeah.
I got to go revisit the Conjurer record for sure.
Yeah, I definitely. I don't
It's
know.
another long one too, isn't it? Isn't this one like
It
approaching
is.
an hour?
It is fairly long.
I
I
don't
don't remember the
remember.
exact runtime. I'm pull it up here. Sure. Yeah, it's 50 minutes long. So
Okay, yeah.
it's
So I mean,
a
that's
little
about
longer
average.
than
Yeah,
your standard
yeah,
album.
not by much. So yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Even if it was an hour, I was still gonna check it out. But I was just curious, like trying to think of why maybe it didn't you know register with me as much. Not that I hate long records, but if it's a long
Yeah.
record and it's also a style that's not typically my like bread and butter, then I could see that, see me turning my nose up at that a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. But that's great. Definitely check it out as I'm going to. So number 6, Conjurer Pathos. Moving on to number 5 on our list, which is a record that you talked about all damn year
Yeah.
and apparently talked about it enough that it actually hit my top 10. And that is Fit for an Autopsy's Oh What the Future Holds.
Yeah, these are actually like Conjure and Fit for an Autopsy were the two that like based on the way we did the math and stuff, we had to like kind of duke it out on which one came first. And despite Conjure being higher on my list, since Fit for an Autopsy hit both of our lists, I figured it belonged higher. Plus, just generally like how much I talked it up at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
I
I was
think.
honestly expecting this to be your album of the year. I was surprised it didn't hit higher on your list.
Yeah, honestly, like if I maybe had like another week or a week less, my top three might have changed places because it was like
Oh
really
yeah.
hard to decide.
My list changed all the time. I have records that were on my top 10 like a week ago that fell off after like re-listening to some records. So,
Yeah.
I understand the struggles.
Yeah, it's just like kind of where you are, I think, like mentally and what, what you're enjoying at the time. Um, but yeah, I don't know. This album, because it came out so early in the year and still similar to like when I was talking about earlier with Worm Shepherd, this was another one that came out earlier this year. And, I just kept listening to it. And even like after Conjurer, listening to it, it made me want to go back to Fit for an Autopsy and listen to that as well. So I've, kept listening to him throughout the year. I mean, I think similar to Conjurer, like, maybe it's one of those albums that, like, even though you don't like harsh vocals generally, maybe it'll strike a chord with you, but it's definitely a heavy album. Like, I can't think of any points where there's like clean vocals in
I think they did
this one.
sneak. I did think that. I think they snuck some in, like in
Oh
some
yeah,
random
I think
spots. I
yeah.
forget
Now you say
the
that.
songs or whatever, but I do think they snuck some in. But for me personally, it's been a really long time since I've enjoyed a deathcore record this much. Because these guys are classified as deathcore, even though there's kind of like that death metal style, like and like sort of the atmospheric stuff that they do isn't super reminiscent of deathcore until they bring those like crushing like core style breakdowns in. Then that's when you're like, all right, I understand why this is classified as deathcore. But it's really like 65% sort of death metal in my opinion, with just like core breakdowns that they mix in, which just makes you do stink face or whatever you want to call it. Just the whole time you're just like, wow, this is heavy.
Yeah.
But that mix, especially with the atmospheric stuff, I know a lot of progressive metal fans like that sort of like tone, that like soundscape in their metal music. That mix of the atmospheric stuff with the death metal, and then core breakdowns put in at the perfect time is sort of what made this record stand out for me, when I really wasn't sure if I was gonna like this record, period.
Yeah.
But you talked it up so much that I listened to it enough that I was just like, all right, it's starting to resonate.
They
And
do a
yeah,
lot of cool stuff with the bends too. Like
yeah,
they just kind of throw in these string bends that like just I don't know, kick it up a notch. Like it's kind of like how in the vein of Meshuggah, where like they throw in these like subtle string bends that you like the more you listen to it, the more you pick it up and you're like, okay, this is cool. And you kind of get that like texture to the music. And I mean, I don't think that Fit for an Autopsy's string bends are like subtle as some of the stuff in Meshuggah is. But I don't know, it added an extra layer to it in addition to like the sweet breakdowns and stuff. And I actually looking at the track list, I do believe The Man That I Was Not has some clean vocals in it. I think that's one of
okay,
the
that's
ones
the
that,
one. I did remember them like coming out of nowhere and me being like, wow, I wasn't expecting this to happen at all on a record like this. So
yeah,
like that was something that I just like in the back of my mind remembered, and I didn't know like I was like, was it this record or was it the Cult of Luna record? Because the soundscapes that are built, I feel like Cult of Luna, it's like a lot. There's a lot more depth to like the soundscape that they built, where this record not as much. I mean, it's still atmospheric and fantastic. Obviously, it landed. I think it landed higher than Cult of Luna for me. I don't actually 100% remember, but yeah. I mean, it's there. That's what I think. Like I remember out of nowhere there were clean vocals, and I was just like, "What? This is
yeah.
crazy."
I think he does them well too, which
Yeah,
says
they're
like,
actually done well. I was like, oh god, this is going to be one of those things where, not that it's a bad thing, I really don't care, but their next record, it's just going to be 50% clean vocals, and they're just going to like start to transition
that is
away.
it is weird when you have like a deathcore band that goes to like clean vocals because it's not a common thing or I guess it's increasingly more common now, but
Yeah,
like I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, like there were no clean vocals really
right.
in deathcore
And
music.
honestly, it's even becoming a lot more dominant in metalcore, where like metalcore, there were always bands that did clean vocals, but you had your bands like August Burns Red and stuff like that barely did any, if any. There are others too, but like then there was bands like Killswitch Engage that almost it was like 50-50, maybe even 60-40 with cleans. Now you got bands like Dayseeker and Sleep Token that that you kind of group into that sort of like metalcore ish, and even Silent Planet, who used to be almost exclusively harsh vocals, now it's like 50-50. Like I
Yeah.
feel like just clean vocals in general are becoming a lot more accepted in metal. And I guess maybe that's why it's starting to creep into all of the subgenres.
Yeah, it's clawing its
So,
way in. But
so
yeah,
we'll.
I think I was surprised by it, and at first, because I was surprised by it, was like off put by it for a second. But then I was like, no, this is actually good, and it kind of fits this song's vibe. And I think that track is actually like the last track on the album too, so it kind of works for like an outro song on an album. So I think that works well. Like maybe if it was like the in the middle of the album, it would be like a little different because you're like thrown off, and then it goes back to being heavy, and it's like, well, that was a weird change of tone, and then it changes
Yeah.
back. But since it
With
kind
like
of
a
wraps up that way, it's kind of like, okay, it puts like a nice little bow on the album. And
like I'm thinking back to like Humanity's Last Breath, like that record where there's like that one song that's super heavy. It was my favorite track of the record, and I don't remember the name of the track off the top of my head, but this is literally just popping into my head now, so I'm just word vomiting it out. There's a song where it's like real heavy the whole way, and then there's just a 30-second section where it's clean, sort of like gang style vocals, and you're just like, this came out of nowhere, but also it was one of the highlights of the track for me. So like it can be done correctly, and I think it worked, like you said, sort of an outro or an
yeah,
intro even, or like an interlude between songs. Like I can see those types of little like that type of stuff working, even in subgenres like deathcore, death metal, stuff like that. So, anyways, Fit for an Autopsy. Oh, What the Future Holds comes in at number 5. Great record. Check it out if you haven't done so already. And moving on to a band that I think it's a crime that we didn't know about sooner.
yeah. Why didn't you tell us,
I
people?
know. We just discovered this band this year. I don't even remember why. Like I don't remember how. We didn't see them live. It's not like Seder where we went to a show and they were there. And it was before because they did come through with Crypto Dira, and it was before that. Like we knew who they
Yeah.
were at that point. And the band is Rollo Tomasi. The album is Where Myth Becomes Memory, and that comes in at number 4 on our top 10. Yeah, I genuinely don't remember. Maybe it was just a Spotify thing. It just popped up and we were just like, this is really good. I don't remember.
I think I think mine was, there was someone that I followed on Instagram that that shared it, and the artwork caught my eye, and just because the people that I follow are generally in the metal scene, that I was like, okay, this is probably something I should check out. And I had never heard them before, and was like, all right, I don't know what to expect, and went in and was like, what is this? This is crazy. Like,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the record's fantastic. The different style changes and stuff almost is reminiscent of like a BT Bam record, where you have a song that's sort of like clean and chill, and then the next song like just drops into this crazy metal. There are even like black metal style vocals at time. Like
yeah.
I hesitate to say that, but I genuinely like I don't know what else to compare it to. Like it's real. You get like the BT Bam meets like like dark BT Bam meets like Spirit Box ish, like Haken flavor like sprinkled in a little bit, contortionist. Like they're all over the place, and in a good way. Like it all flows really well. It all makes sense. Like the record itself, like I said, flows really well. There's something for everyone on the record, I feel like, too. If you're a fan of Spirit Box, they have Spirit Box style tracks. If you're a fan of Between the Buried and Me, they've got those crazy, like longer songs with style changes and vocally and instrumentally. If you're a fan of black metal, I don't think necessarily you'll like this, but there are some interesting vocals that you might find interesting. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
I think Closer is, if I'm not mistaken, completely clean vocals, and it's
Yeah, it's
like
clean. And
softer.
that's like a Spirit Box, honestly, or like the Contortionist EP. What the hell is the name of that EP? Doesn't matter. Like
Our
even
Bones.
like yes, Our Bones. Thank you. Like even sort of like Contortionist, Clairvoyant, Our Bones era. Like that song Closer reminds me of that a little bit. And I think like when we talked about this
Yeah.
record earlier in the year, that might have been my comparison. But yeah, somewhere in there. But yeah, then there's songs that just come out of nowhere and just melt your face off
Yeah,
and
then you got
super
like
heavy and
Prescience, I think is how you pronounce it.
yeah,
Then that song just like immediately starts off with that like black metal sounding like it just the first note is just like a chug and then like harsh vocals and you're like there's no way this is the same band. Like and I even did that with with Colleen and was like I played Closer and she liked that song and then I changed it to Prescience and she was and I was like, this is the same band. And she just looked at me like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's wild. This album is crazy and I do think they do it all well. Like
oh yeah, for sure.
the the clean vocals just sound so pretty. Like it's so like peaceful and ambient, but then it goes into this like chaotic, like almost like car bomby at times from like an
Yeah,
instrumentation
for sure,
standpoint.
for sure.
And then like has like the black metal, like I don't know. I think this is like kind of seems to be the theme for this year is like bands doing different things and combining uncommon elements of stuff. Like for me, Conjurer hit so high because it does have that like flavor of black metal, but it's not like recorded on a cell phone from 1990. It actually has like good production value,
Right.
and it's not about like murdering people and lighting churches on fire and and stuff. Not that like that it ultimately matters that much from the subject matter, but it's a little more wholesome content, I
For
guess.
sure.
But I think like I am intrigued by the black metal, like some of the elements of black metal. But I want my music to have like a good production value, and I think Rolla Tomasi pulls in some of those elements, but does its own thing too, and has like the spirit box stuff, which we've talked about numerous times. We both love.
Yep.
So I think this album is. I can't believe we haven't heard of them prior to
I
this,
know.
but it's definitely a band that is going to remain on my radar for any future releases.
Better late than never.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, this record, Rollo Tomasi, Where Myths Become Memory, number 4 on our list.
Also a cool album name too.
It is. It is a really cool album name. Yeah, for fans of Between the Buried and Me, Spirit Box, Haken, Contortionist, maybe a little black metal flavor. Who knows? But definitely go check this out, especially if you haven't heard of them. Like we didn't for the longest time. You're welcome. Moving on to number 3, Monuments in Stasis. This was my album of the year. This record for me,
Solid case.
from start to finish, is just flawless. It's the best Monuments record since the Amanuensis, or however the hell that's pronounced. And honestly, this just might be the best Monuments record. Like it might be better than anything else that they've ever put out. I think Andy Chiswick has elevated this band like back to the mountaintop of progressive metal, because I genuinely feel like they were there back in those days. They sort of fell off, got lazy. Their sound kind of got sort of stale. And then this record just dropped a bomb on the scene for me.
Yeah, this album it's really good. It didn't land quite as high as for me as it did for you, but that's just purely because of all the other good stuff. So, like I still very much loved this album, and I agree that I think this is my favorite Monuments album, and I don't think that there is a bad track on this album. So even though it didn't land as high for me, like I'm happy with where it landed on our definitive list. Like I think 3 is a good spot
it
for
made
it. And
it made top 3, so I was content. If it was going to
Yeah.
be below that, I was probably going to put up a fight. But literally, I struggled like for my like best songs of 2022. I struggled not just dropping the whole record under that playlist. I still probably put 5 songs on there because like the first single Lavos was really good. Cardinal Red is just an all-time track. That song is so good. And it's not even my favorite track on the record because the Cimmerian or Cimmerian or however however you pronounce that, like the longest song, the closing song on that record just goes so freaking hard. This record is amazing for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't believe like with them dropping Cardinal Red as one of the singles and enjoying it so much and then like when the album comes out, then finding out that as good as that song was, it's like, I mean, it's still like very much, I could easily see it being people's favorite song on the album, but there are so many other songs on the album that are like of equal quality, like the Sumerian or Camarian or however you pronounce it. Like that one and Cardinal Red are probably tied for my favorite tracks. But
False Providence is good. Everything that
Yeah.
Mick Gordon puts his hands on this record is good. Spencer Stiletto has a feature on this record.
I'm
on
honestly
Arch
surprised
Essence.
that didn't end up being my favorite just because of how big of a fan of Periphery I am. But that
It was
just
honestly
speaks-
probably one of the lesser tracks for me on the record. But like I said, I could have easily just dragged and dropped this whole record on my best songs of 2022 playlist. Like this is just. For me, this was a flawless record. This was as good as it gets for 2022. There are definitely probably people out there that don't agree with that, because I've honestly not seen it talked about enough. Like this record needed to be talked about more. I feel like in like the more sort of like popular outlets, whatever. Not that we're not popular, Matt. But
I was gonna say, what are we?
But
No, I'm just
But
kidding.
I feel like this record didn't get enough hype, and maybe it just got forgotten about. I don't know. But if you forgot about this record, or if you've not listened to this record, you're doing yourself a disservice. Go check this out, especially if you like progressive metal, and especially if you like older Monuments before they got stale. The Amanuensis, and again, I will never pronounce that correctly. That record, it's similar. It's got a similar vibe to that record, but it's produced better. And like I said, I feel like Andy Chiswick sort of brings it to a new level. Like
He has an awesome vocal range. Like he is very talented, and I think like just the whole band together, like they seem to have like a lot of chemistry built up. Like the songs, their songwriting capabilities and everything, just like it all clicked for this album, I think.
for sure. So yeah, number 3, Monuments in Stasis. Definitely check it out if you've not. It is fantastic. Moving on to another fantastic record, one of my favorite records of the year, and clearly one of both of our favorite records of the year, seeing as it lands number 2, is Fallujah's Empyrean, or Empyrean. It's one of those.
I don't want to. Yeah.
It's one of those. So, in my opinion, their Dreamless record is one of the best records in the genre of like progressive metal or progressive death metal or whatever the hell they fit into. So when this record dropped with like a new lineup, because it's a new vocalist from that record. I'm pretty sure it's a new guitarist. I kind of assumed that they were going to take a step backwards. And I was wrong. I was very wrong, and I'm glad that I was wrong, because while I do think Dreamless might be a better record overall, this record by far exceeded my expectations. At the very, it could be on par with Dreamless. That's how good this record is. I think it sets sort of a similar tone, that ambient feel that we know and love. And just crushing instrumentation. The vocals, they did not miss a beat with the new vocalist. They still do some of the like clean vocal layering in with like the female clean vocal layering on some of the tracks that, it was one of my favorite parts of Dreamless and also one of my favorite parts of this record. Yeah, I mean, what do you think of this record? I don't remember where it fell on your list.
It was pretty high on mine. I think I had it at number 5, so it was pretty high on my list as well. I agree that I think maybe for me it was like like if I was comparing it to Fallujah's Dreamless, I would say like maybe I like it slightly less, but also like Dreamless is kind of like you said, sort of pinnacle.
Yeah, that's like an all-time record for
Yeah.
that, for the genre.
And so it's like it's hard to beat, but it comes damn close, I think. And I mean, there are so many good tracks on this one. I think it was one of the singles before the album was released, Radiant Ascension.
Yeah, that song is very good.
Yeah.
I feel like the record is very not front loaded. It starts off so good. The first four tracks, like leading all the way through to Into the Eventide, which I think is the best song on the record.
Yeah, that was going to be the next one that I listed too. Is like Radiant Ascension and Into the Eventide are like my two faves on this.
Yeah, so
This
like
one.
just the fact that the first four songs are absolute bangers, it just gets you going. And I honestly think it closes well with Artifacts. I feel like that's another standout track on the record. So, it's not just a front loaded record where it's like, here's all of our best songs and then, filler at the end. Like it closes well. And yeah, like I said, they don't miss a beat with the new lineup at all. The vocalist does an incredible job on this record. They keep that sort of ambient feel throughout. They sort of stick to like their style. Like, sometimes whenever you get a lineup change, you get a significant style change from a band. Think of bands like The Contortionist,
Yeah.
and that's not to say that it's for the better or for the worse. Everybody has their own opinions. But when Mike Lessard came in on vocals for The Contortionist, Language was a very different record from anything else that they had. And I was going to say anything else that they've released. And it got progressively different as they moved forward. So, Clairvoyant was a very different record than, when you compare like Exoplanet to Clairvoyant, you would think that it's two different bands almost. So,
yeah, I agree.
so whenever Fallujah sort of announced a new lineup change, you don't know what to expect. And like I said, it by far exceeded my expectations. It's one of the best records of the year. And that is why Fallujah's Imperion, however the hell you want to pronounce it, lands at number 2 on our combined list. And moving on to, unless you have anything else to say.
Nope, no, I'm good. We can
All right.
move on to numero
Moving
uno.
on to number 1, this should come as no surprise to anybody that's listening to this, who has listened to us in the past. While this record did not technically hit either of our number ones, it was high enough on both of our lists that when we combined our lists, our number 1 record of the year is Coheed and Cambria's Vaxis 2, A Window of the Waking Mind. We're both pretty huge Coheed fans.
And we met our quota for talking about them.
Yep. although the last episode I did not talk about them, and I knew
true.
it, and I was gonna throw it in at the end, but I was like, you know what, growth. But yeah, I mean, this record for me, they did a lot of sort of experimenting, and they sort of announced that they were going to be doing that, before the record dropped. They said it was going to test the fan base. I think it certainly did that. And I think I think that makes this record sort of a polarizing record among the fan base, which honestly, pretty much every record they drop is polarizing for the fan base anymore. But I would go as far as to say that the last 3 tracks on this record are some of the best songs that they've ever dropped, and especially since like Good Apollo 1. They're very like in the same vein as the Willing Wells. Ladders
Yeah.
of Supremacy is one of the best songs they've ever written, if not like the best song. I don't want to say that because they have so many great songs, but
It is a fantastic song.
it's
so
probably a top 10 song in their discography. And just the way those last 3 songs flow, even though they didn't sort of label them as sort of like a suite of songs, kind of like what they've done in past records with the Willing Wells and Camper Valerium and the, stuff like that. The Key Entity Extraction suite of songs, it sort of flows like those.
Yeah.
That rhymes. It sort of flows like that. So, yeah, honestly, 3 of the best songs they've ever written. But the rest of the album is very interesting. You have a couple sort of, like typical poppy type of Coheed songs, and then I get a lot of like 80s synthwave in a lot of their other stuff. Even some like The Weeknd, like the singer,
absolutely.
the musician, The Weeknd. And I don't know if I would like this record as much as I ended up liking this record if it didn't come out shortly after Stranger Things, whenever I was sort of in that weird like 80s like synthy, like that's kind of the score for that show is very much like 80s synthwave. And I really enjoy that show, and I was kind of already in that mentality, and then the record dropped. So it almost like dropped at the perfect time for me because I was already sort of in that mentality. So a lot of those songs actually clicked with me when I'm not sure if they would have previously.
Yeah, I think for me, this one was just like there's so many like poppy like feel good jams in it, but then it also hits you with the Ladders of Supremacy and stuff on there that's like just a really good proggy song. And it just has like this nice blend of different. It's like I know you have your like pop heed and your like prog heed and stuff, but this album kind of has a little bit of all of it, I think.
Which I feel like they do a lot. Really, the only record in my, not the only record, but the most standout record that sort of didn't venture into prog really at all was Color Before the Sun. Like you get prog
Yeah.
elements on You're the Black Rainbow. Obviously on Good Apollo, that's probably their proggiest record. The Vaxis One record has some prog elements. I mean, Good Apollo 1, I think I already said that. Good Apollo 2, a little bit, not as much. Obviously, on both Afterman records, there's prog elements on certain tracks.
Yeah.
So I mean, you get a good mix on most of their records, which is why I think they have such a diverse fan base. Because you have people who discovered them from Favor House Atlantic, and then you have people who discovered them from Welcome Home, and then you have
Yeah.
people who discovered them from, who have been fans from the beginning and like really like the post-hardcore type vibes that they put out like on Second Stage and in Keeping Secrets. So like there's such a mix, and and they tour with such a mix. They've toured with Between the Buried and Me and Russian Circles, and then they've toured with Mothica, and they've toured with Taking Back Sunday, and you know what I mean? Like there's such a mix.
Yeah.
They have like that emo pop punk crowd, and then they have the sort of prog crowd and
Yeah,
post
and they
hardcore crowd.
kind of
Like they're
blend.
just right. So that's why any given record drop, depending on which like version of Coheed that record favors, you're gonna get people who love it and people who hate it.
Yeah. I think just like in this year where like my list was by and large like heavier, more like heavier in like instrumentation, but also in like subject matter and like darker themes and stuff that and then the Coheed one was just kind of like this like feel good like dancey album that like you just put it on and you just kind of it's not like you're not headbanging necessarily, you're kind of just like dancing around and and stuff, and like it's very you like sing along to and stuff. It's like just getting into it. And when I was re-listening through all the albums to like solidify my ranking, it was like I debated putting it number one just because like every song that comes on is like, oh man, this one too, and stuff. And I think it's got something for everybody on it. And it does seem like, I know you mentioned earlier about them like testing the fan base and stuff, but it seemed like from what I read of posts in like the Coheed like groups and stuff that I'm in, it seemed like generally speaking, most people enjoyed at least some of the songs on the album. Like I didn't really see anyone just being like flat out like, this album sucks, I hate it so much. It was like most people were like, oh, I don't like this song, but I like this song. Kind
I
of.
feel like if you remove a song like Ladders of Supremacy from the record, there's going to be a lot more hate. You know what I mean? Like I feel like Ladders was enough to like sort of scratch the prog itch for the like prog heed fan. I mean, and Windows of the Waking Mind, the title track, is a prog opera essentially. I mean, it's a prog rock opera pretty
Yeah.
much. So I mean, really, those last three tracks kind of scratch the prog itch, and then the beginning of the record with like Beautiful Losers and Liars Club and stuff like that sort of scratches like the pop punk, pop whatever you want to call it, pop heed itch. And then all the experimental stuff sort of just sandwiched in the middle, and you know, the pop Heed fans liked the first part of it. The prog Heed fans liked the end of it. And honestly, like as sort of a person who leans towards the prog side of it, obviously, I liked Beautiful Losers as a song. The Liars Club grew on me. Some of the like 80s synthy stuff, honestly, like I said, kind of was, I was intrigued by. So I think this record was polarizing for a lot of fans just because if it's not all one way, like people are going to complain about it. But
Yeah.
there was something for everybody on this record, which usually there is on every Coheed record. So I think like, sort of the complaining and the gripes or whatever, no one I don't think is going to put this as their favorite Coheed record ever. There are probably people out there that would, but I think there's something for everyone on it to the point where no one's going to say that this is the worst Coheed record ever either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like probably for most Coheed fans, this is somewhere in the middle. For me, it's like middle high, like middle up, like somewhere in like the upper middle for me.
Yeah.
It's not better than Good Apollo 1. That record is my favorite Coheed record. It's not better than In Keeping Secrets. I think it edges out maybe. Like I'm not gonna like this doesn't put it at 3, but I'm just comparing it to Vaxis 1 now. I think maybe it edges out Vaxis 1 for me. Dark Sentencer and The Gutter are just all-time Coheed tracks as well. So it's tough.
It's tough, yeah. That is a tough comparison.
But I think Ladders of Supremacy is better than anything on Vaxis 1. So that's why it's like I don't know, because like I said, I genuinely think Ladders of Supremacy is like a top 5, top 10 Coheed track. So without sitting there and trying to think about it, because I don't want to do that, we'll be here forever. But yeah, Coheed and Cambria, Vaxis 2, Window of the Waking Mind, number 1 on our list. Do you have anything else you want to say in closing on our list?
I think the way we ended up, doing the averaged out list and like taking our two and kind of combining it. At first, I was like nervous that it was going to create a list that neither of us were happy with. But I think that it ended up making, I don't know, it made the list better to me because it was like alleviated some of my like inner monologue things that were like, oh, should I put this one here? Should I put this here? Because we like moved them in places, and I feel comfortable with this list, and I like very much enjoy all of the bands on here, even though like some may be higher or lower than where maybe I individually ranked them. I'm still like happy with how everything turned out, I think.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel as well. The top 3 was still my top 3, just in a different order, so I thought that was cool. For me, even though your number 1 fell to 6, but still,
it still made top 10 though.
Yeah, I still think that this was a solid top 10 list. I'm happy with it as well. We are going to be posting on Instagram sort of a visual so you can see the top 10, so you don't have to like take notes or scroll or whatever while you're watching this. And we'll also post our individual top 10s just in case anyone's curious to see sort of the differences and. If certain records that weren't on this list were on, my list or Matt's list or the different order and such.
Yeah, and I'm sure that some people that listen like may align more closely with like my taste in music, and some may align more with yours. So some people may be like, "Oh, I'm curious what Dan's 10 is," and I'm like, I don't care what Matt's are, and
maybe we'll throw a poll up too and say which top 10 list do you align with the most, and we'll do all 3. We'll do our combined, yours and then mine, and then see
which one's
see kind of what the fan base thinks. I think next year too, maybe like we'll do a little bit more prep, and then maybe we'll create like some kind of bracket style thing and actually come up with like a fans top 10. I think that would be kind of a cool thing to do.
That would be a cool idea.
So maybe next year we'll do that. We're looking forward to sort of continuing on with this. We got a lot of ideas, and we're hoping to be able to bring a lot of them to fruition in 2023. So, definitely looking forward to it. One more thing before we go: top standout tracks this year. I know we kind of talked about some of them while we went. I don't know how many. Just how many do you want to throw out there? Like 3, 5? I could probably freaking rattle a bunch off.
Yeah, I was just saying maybe we'll limit it to like 3.
Let's limit it to 3. What are your top 3 tracks? Top 3 tracks of the year.
Top three. Um, I'd probably, just because that Contra album hit so high for me, I'd have to say Basilisk on that album. Um, and even though it didn't hit quite as high for me, I'd say Cardinal Red on Monuments. Just that song alone is just like kind of was one of like the pinnacles of this year, in my opinion. Um, and then my third,
There's an obvious one.
I'd have to go with Ladders of Supremacy for
Yes, sir.
my third. Actually, I'd probably put that. I'd put that in my number one spot
Yeah.
if I'm like ranking them in order of like favorite.
No, it doesn't have to be a
least,
rank.
but
Yeah, I would throw Ladders of Supremacy in mine too, but since you threw it in there, I'll refrain, and I'll say Into the Eventide from Fallujah, The Sumerian from Monuments, and I was just a really big fan of the song Rain from Unprocessed. Just the
it is a good track.
The instrumentation, the guitar, that intro. I'm a huge fan of that song and that record, obviously, but. Yeah, maybe we'll throw that into a playlist. We'll actually potentially, not potentially, I think we're going to do it, have sort of a best songs of 2022 playlist that we're going to throw up onto our, our link tree. The link in our bio has a couple of other Spotify playlists that we've created. One's a Jams of the Week playlist that we try to update every week. So if you want to like discover some new music or rediscover some old music, it's kind of a mix. Be sure to jump on and follow that playlist. And we'll throw this one up as another playlist. It'll just be sort of a compilation of all of our favorite songs of 2022. So be on the lookout for that. Again, be on the lookout for the posts that'll sort of kind of go with this episode. Our different top 10 lists. We'll have polls, all that fun stuff. We announced a giveaway in the last episode. If we haven't already posted something for that, that's coming soon. Keep an eye out. That giveaway is going to be for a signed CD of Language from The Contortionist. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And hopefully everybody got everything they wanted for Christmas this year.
Merry Christmas.
If not, as we've discussed before, Eargasm is a sponsor for us, and it's an amazing product. They have a bunch of different options. I think it's kind of essential for metalheads, especially people who go to live shows. So if you're interested, definitely check it out. There's a link to that in our link tree as well. And if you use code Djentlemen10 at checkout, you get a discount. We can't hype up this product more. It's something I've been using for 4 years. Matt's been using it for years as well, and it's honestly an ear saver.
Yeah,
it really is.
With all the albums that we have been teased that will be almost certainly dropping this year, I imagine there will also be at least a few tours in there. Between Periphery, The Contortionist, Haken, all of those bands dropping their albums, I imagine at least one of them will have a tour in support of the album. With touring going to be pick up some earplugs so you can go and enjoy the show and not go
honestly,
deaf.
I mean, as a person who wants to be like the stereotypical person that like ends up on a TikTok video of like the old guy at a metal show, like I want to be that guy, and I want to still be able to enjoy the music. So I'm trying to preserve my hearing, and that's just something that I think is essential. So again, we wouldn't sort of promote a product if we didn't 100% believe in it, and we genuinely believe in this product. Eargasm.com or the link in our link tree, Djentlemen10 at checkout. Definitely give it a look if you're interested. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, definitely.
But this is dropping on New Year's, or pretty damn close. So definitely want to wish everybody a happy New Year. Stay safe out there. The weather's been pretty nuts recently. So and keep an eye out for our upcoming episodes. I think we're gonna do maybe sort of like albums we're looking forward to, kind of like how we did last year. For this upcoming year. We've already talked about a couple with Periphery and Haken, and August Burns Red's got a record drop in.
Yeah, I keep forgetting that
Contortionist.
one. We keep like you keep mentioning it, and I keep forgetting.
Silent Planet played a unreleased, like, a new track on their most recent tour, so like they might be coming up with new music. So there's a lot to look forward to in 2023, and we look forward to discussing it all with you in future episodes. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, and keep an eye out for more. We're gonna try to drop episodes a little more regularly, and yeah, Happy New Year, Merry Gentmas, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, everyone.